What is going on, you guys? My name's Bubba, and welcome back to another insane story. So one thing I understood is that apparently people are saying that the country of love is Paris. And I don't really know if I believe that. Because back when I was in high school, I took this course when I was in grade 11 that was French. And I remember when I was heading to my first time going to this French class, I was excited. Because let's be real here, who doesn't want to see a hot French girl? Like, for God's sakes, they literally invented French kissing. Like, it's literally called French kissing. Sorry. Back to what I'm saying. Anyways, I remember I entered inside the classroom. When I got in there, I was looking around the classroom. When I looked around, I realized that there weren't that many girls, but there were actually a decent amount of guys in there. It kind of sucks because it ended up being a sausage fest, but at the end of the day, I still sat in the back of the classroom and just stared around. While we were waiting for the teacher to come in, we realized that we didn't have a teacher for like the first 20 minutes of class. It was kind of weird, but then out of nowhere, I remember the door opens, and since I was in the back, I got a really good view of the door of whoever could enter in, and a person entered through the door, and it was this really hot girl. Now, at first, I thought this was like a student, you know, it was a really hot student. She looks young. She's very attractive. She has nice cherries, good peaches. We're not losing here. So my idea was to, you know, kind of like tell her like, hey, like there's a spot right here. So I kind of like whispered that to her as she was like entering in the classroom. She enters in. She looks at me. She's like, oh, that's good. Did you not find a partner? A partner? Sorry, I wanted you to sit beside me, is what I told her. But then she said, oh no, I'm the teacher. What? I remember this girl ends up walking in front of the classroom and ends up putting her name on the board. And I remember when she wrote her name, she had like this weird foreign like enchantment table language where like she had like weird E's and O's, and it made no sense to me, but I don't know. It looks hot in the beginning, I guess. I don't know. It made sense that she was French, basically, is what I'm saying. Anyways, going on, I remember she basically got set up and she basically sat down on the desk and she started reading out our names to the class. I remember the whole time, all the guys in the classroom were just basically saying how hot she was. And I'm not gonna lie, for a girl like her, she was attractive. And let's just say, if you guys know me well enough, well, I'm gonna spit some W Riz. Now, you guys are probably saying, Bubba, you don't got Riz, bro. You literally just met the teacher, bro. There's no way you're actually gonna get Riz. Watch, bro. Just watch what I did. So I remember one of the days when French class was going on, basically my teacher acknowledged that I was there, but she didn't really like want to like full on acknowledge me because, you know, she's a teacher. So I remember, to make sure she was like, you know, kind of interested in me in the beginning, we ended up having a movie day. And you guys know that feeling when you guys are gonna watch a movie in your guys' classroom, you guys all get like kind of excited or lazy or bored, or you guys just know that you guys are not gonna get homework and are happy about it. That was basically me. But me, I wanted to sit beside the teacher while this happened. So in the first span of 1 week, I remember I ended up actually moving my desk up to the front of the classroom near hers. And on top of that, when it was the movie day, what I ended up doing was I actually ended up suggesting a movie that was actually very romantic. And I'm not gonna lie, there aren't a lot of Paris movies out there, okay? But the one I chose was the Monster in Paris. One, because the title, it literally says Paris in it, so there's no way that this movie was not about Paris. And on top of that, it was a romantic movie about, you know, some ugly monster thingy. I don't know. You guys can go watch it yourselves. I'm not here to tell you the movie. Going on, I remember when class was starting and we were watching this movie, this teacher kept looking at me and she kept like kind of like staring at me because I would basically bring popcorn to class every time there was like a movie. I don't know, I think that's just me, but going on, I remember basically when we were watching the movie and I was eating this popcorn, this teacher comes down beside me and says, hey Bubba, can I have some? I ended up saying sure, and she ends up taking some popcorn with her and taking it to her desk and eating it as well. We were eating the popcorn basically, and then I remember she ended up just kind of sitting her chair beside me and eating the popcorn with me at this point. Now a lot of guys in the classroom were kind of like questioning like, yo, like why is this guy kind of just like sitting beside the teacher? That's kind of weird, bro. But then going on, I remember I still, you know, sat beside her and was just basically flirting with her and talking to her as the movie was going on. At this point, I basically lost attention to the movie and I just kept, you know, talking to her. And I remember she basically talked about like how like she found it really hard to move here from Paris and seeing this movie was one of her favorites. And I don't know, let's just say I got a really good getaway with her. And at this point, I didn't even have to spit Riz. I just got a major W by just choosing a movie and eating popcorn. Anyways, going on with the story, I remember it got to a point where I basically had my arm around her. I literally decided to do the classic yawn move and put my arm over her shoulder and basically wrap my arm around her, and we started continuing watching the movie. And the teacher did definitely notice that I did this. She definitely saw it and she actually kind of liked it. I remember she looked at me and just smiled. It was interesting. And reminder, I was in grade 11, so I was only like what, 16 turning 17 at this time, so it wasn't like majorly illegal. It just was not legal. Anyways, going on with the story, I remember when she saw it, she kind of like ended up taking one of my pieces of paper and she ended up basically writing down to meet her after school. And honestly, I was kind of worried because I didn't know if this was good news or it was bad news. So I kind of like looked at her and I wrote down on the piece of paper beside her of what she said and said, did I have to? She looked at me and she said yes. And at that point, I knew I was probably definitely in trouble. Anyways, the rest of the school day went on, and basically after school, I remember I walked into her classroom and I saw she was there. She was there alone, and I remember when I entered inside, she came up to the door, closed the the door behind her and said, listen, what happened in today's class cannot happen again. You understand? I kind of looked at her and I'm like, what? And she kind of like looked at me. She's like, listen, I think you're very attractive and you are fascinating, but I got to admit this. You cannot be doing that in the middle of everyone. I kind of just said, oh, like, you know what? Like, I'm sorry. Like, I was just trying to, like, you know, you're hot. You know, like at this point, I was just complimenting her back to back. Then she looks at me, her face turns red and says, you're a romantic, you know. I end up telling her, yeah. And then she ended up, and this was the most mind-blowing thing, she ended up getting her phone out, pulling out Snapchat, and basically made her add her on Snapchat. I literally added this girl on Snapchat out of nowhere. So I added her on Snap, and then when I did, I ended up leaving the classroom, and then she ended up messaging me right away saying, hey, this is my address. If you want to come over, why not? We can watch a real movie there. Okay, bet is what I said. I was pretty excited when she said that. I was like, okay, so I'm gonna go and see this hot French girl and like go to her house. Poggers, dude. I remember knowing this. I got inside my car that I had, the Toyota Celica. If you guys don't know, it's my favorite blue sports car that I had back when I was a kid, or in high school, I should say. And then I ended up actually like texting her back saying, yo, like I'll meet you at your place. Like if you want tonight, like, you know, it's Friday, might as well. No school tomorrow. And then she said, oh, I would love that. Okay, just come over at like 9:30. I was like, bet. So I remember at 9:30, I literally took my car. I drove over to her place. And when I got there, she lived in this like really nice apartment building. I went inside the apartment. I met her up there and I just started talking to her and we started flirting. I remember she was gonna pour me a glass of wine, but I was not legal age. So she ended up pouring me a glass of juice, which I mean, progress to her. She was being responsible. And then from there, we ended up sitting down watching a movie, but we started watching this other French movie. But the thing that sucked is that it was all in French. There was no English parts to it, not even subtitles. So I was really annoyed, but you know what? At the end of the day, I wasn't really focused on the movie because me and her, we ended up doing the Devil's Tango on the couch, literally midway through the movie. Actually, not even midway. I think it was like 17 seconds in the movie. I don't even remember the movie. That's how much I really didn't care about it. And I remember we were basically there all night and it was the most craziest thing. I remember I ended up staying the night there and then like things were really good to the point where the next day, I remember I went back home and it was a weekend. It was only Saturday. So I was just kind of hanging out with my friends. Sunday came along. I just played Xbox and went to church because, you know, God bless, amen. And then the last thing was on Sunday night around 6:30, I got a text message from the girl again. She said she wanted me to come over. She said she felt lonely and she said she wanted my good eggplant. I don't know what that means, but honestly, I guess she just wanted to do the Devil's Tango again. So I remember I went back to her place and I drove at nighttime. My parents told me, Baba, make sure you go to school tomorrow if you're gonna go out, okay? And I literally told my parents, like, Mom, don't worry. My teacher will know I'm there. Because I'm literally gonna go see my teacher. I didn't tell her that last part, but you guys know what I mean. And when I got to her place, I remember I met up with her and I went back to her apartment building. We started watching another movie. But in reality, as you guys may know, we started doing the Devil's Tango again. Knowing I did it with my French teacher twice in a row was a major W. Like major. But the thing that sucked was the next day when we went to school, we ended up going together and she came in my car to school. And when I parked my car in the teacher's parking lot, really early in the morning, by the way, because teachers have to get there early apparently, she literally told me stay in the car and she basically got out of my car. She ended up walking out and like started heading for the front of the parking lot. And right as she enters inside the school, the principal walks out of the school, sees me in the parking lot and walks up to my car saying, Bubba, did your French teacher just come out of your car? Maybe. Bubba, we need to have a conversation in my office. I remember we ended up going to the office and basically like he started asking me questions like, why did you drive her this early? Like, what's the issue here? Are you guys like in any way a relationship? And all I said was, oh, like we met up at a coffee shop early so she can teach me more French for a French test. I said that to him as if I pulled it off, but yeah, let's just say I didn't. And long story short, all I'm gonna say was that I guess I didn't get to see my French teacher after the second week of her teaching. All right, so what is going on, you guys? My name is Bubba and welcome back to another insane story. So today's story takes place back when I was in high school. And funny enough, this was back in my high school years of me being a dumb teenager. And if you guys know this channel a lot, you guys know I am pretty much one of the guys in my high school that always did the Devil's Tango. And let's just say today's story does get really insane. But before I fully get into it, I just want to say a special announcement. Since Christmas is coming up, we're doing a Christmas advent calendar on my Discord server, meaning that there are going to be fun challenges, games, streams, and movie nights all throughout this week. And also not to mention, there are awesome giveaways that you guys can participate in. So if this interests you at all and you guys want to have some fun this holiday season, make sure you guys do click the link down in the description down below and join the Discord server. Anyways, let's get straight into this awesome story. So knowing this, honestly, I think one of the classes I really struggled with back in high school was science class. No, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not bad at science, but at the same time, I'm one of those kids that that when I go to school, I only want to learn subjects I actually care about. Like, for example, keyboarding. I love typing on keyboards and also doing computer stuff. So honestly, it was easy. Let's just say all the easy classes I wanted to do and all the classes that really took my mind to really put into work, I did not want to do. And science was one of them. I remember one day though, I was going into my science class, and when I entered in there, I remember my buddy came up to me saying, "Yo, Bubba, real quick, bro, did you know they changed the science teacher?" I remember I was really confused because we had like the same science teacher for like the first 3 months of our science class being a thing for our semester, but then they ended up changing it to some chick that we never even heard of. We're just gonna call her Miss M. Now, Miss M, apparently a lot of people were talking about her throughout the school, saying that she was one of the most attractive teachers they've seen, and on top of that, she was very jitty. If you guys know what jitty means, basically like she's really like upbeat. She's really perky. That's a better word for it. So knowing this, I was like, okay, well, whatever. How bad could it be? So I remember I ended up going into my classroom, and afterwards, when I went in there and sat down, I remember I saw this teacher walk up in front of the class, and she was one perky lady. Like, no joke, she literally started the class off with like her hands together saying, "All right, class, get ready for an amazing day." And when I looked at her, the more I thought about it, I could not figure out how old she was. Like, no joke when I say this, I thought she was like either in her 20s or in her 40s. Like, it was that weird of an age gap that I could not tell how old she was. And obviously, don't get me wrong, I could just put my hand up and ask her, "How old are you?" But at the same time, I feel like that could lead to a lot of bad things. I don't know, my mom always told me never ask a woman how old they are because, you know, it's not the right thing to do. But at the same time though, you can never tell what's what anymore. Like, seriously, there are 12-year-olds that look like they're 20. Like, this world's really gone downhill at this point. Anyways, going on with the story, I remember when this teacher was teaching the class, one thing I really realized was like she kept staring at me for no reason. And every time like she asked a question, she looked at me first with eye contact and then looked at all the other students right after. It was like she was expecting something from me, and I have no idea what. Obviously, I didn't answer any of the questions that she asked that science class, nor did I even care, to be honest, because like I said earlier in the video, I didn't really pay attention to school, nor did I care enough for it. But then I remember after a while, she asked this one question that was really bizarre. She said, "Okay, Bubba, so can you tell me, do you have 11 protons?" I remember I looked at her and I'm like, "What? Protons? What do you mean?" And then she said afterwards, really oddly, "Because you are sodium fine." What is what I said? I remember so confused, and then afterwards, a bunch of students started laughing, especially like the smart kids in the back of the classroom that were sitting there. They all looked at me and said, "Do you not understand what she just said, loser?" And then I remember I looked at her and I'm like, "Huh? I didn't understand the question," because I thought I got the answer wrong, which I obviously would have if I ended up saying, "Wait, what?" But you guys know what I mean. But then she just ignored the question and then just kept working in the classroom and teaching the class. Now, honestly, I had no idea what happened that moment. I remember I was really confused, and then afterward, my buddy texted me saying, "Dude, did you not understand what just happened?" And as I quickly glanced at my phone, I texted him back saying, "Dude, I have no idea what you mean." And then literally, he ended up texting me back saying, "The teacher just flirted with you, bro. Like, literally just flirted with you in front of all of us." I remember I looked around and I saw everyone just staring at me still, and I'm like, "Oh, that's weird," and ignored it and just kept listening to the class. Anyways, after class, I remember everyone got up and the bell rang, and basically I was ready to leave my classroom, but right before I left, I remember the teacher ended up saying, "Hey, Bubba, can you come here real quick?" I remember I turn around and I look at her, I'm like, "Yeah, what's going on?" And then afterwards, I ended up walking up to her and she said, "Yeah, so I was just wondering, do you need like extra help in class? Because like I'm down to help you every day after school for a bit." And I remember I looked at her and I'm like, "Am I failing my class?" Because if I wasn't, then I wasn't gonna stay, obviously. But then afterwards, she ended up going to her computer, looking at me, looking back at her computer, and then says, "Yeah, you're actually failing. You're at a 42%. I remember I was so confused because the last teacher that before he left, he ended up saying that I was at a 65. So I was passing, but now I'm failing 45%. What? None of it made sense. So I remember I ended up looking at her saying, all right, I guess I'll do some extra courses, because, you know, she said she would help me out. So obviously, I remember during that day, I remember going to my other classes and kind of panicking, but at the same time weirded out how randomly I was failing a class that I thought I was doing good in, or at least passing. I remember I was super confused and I was just doing my own thing, doing my own classes, and afterwards my buddy walked up to me saying, "Dude, it's so weird how that teacher flirted with you in science class." And after I looked at him, I'm like, "Yeah, but dude, I'm failing my class." He ended up looking at me saying, "What? We were passing literally not even before she came." And that's when I started to think a bit differently. I thought maybe that she was making me fail just so I would see her. So I was gonna go confront her, but honestly, at the same time, I'm not gonna lie, guys. She wasn't like ugly, you know what I mean? Like, she looked young, but at the same time, she looked old. I don't know. It just got to the point where I was questioning in my mind, should I do this or not? Then I remember after school came, and basically I ended up, you know, going towards her classroom when the bell rang, and I ended up going into the classroom, and she looked at me and said, "Hey, Bubba, welcome to class." I remember I looked around and I saw no one was there. It was just me. And you would think for a person that's, you know, trying to help other students to pass their class, there's no way I'm failing science out of the whole school. Like, seriously, out of the entire school, I'm the only one failing science class? That made no sense. But anyways, I ended up sitting down and I ended up basically starting to, you know, listen to what she was teaching and stuff. And every time she would teach something, she kept making a pickup pickup line. Like, I remember the other one she said, she was literally like, are you made of copper and tellurium? Because you are C-U-T-E, cute. And I remember when she said that, I was just so weirded out. It got to the point where I just didn't want to be there. And I kept, telling her, honestly, like, don't get me wrong, I like the lines and the pickup lines and stuff, but it's not really like my way of learning. Then I remember when I said that, she ended up looking at me and saying, oh, really now? And then she ended up coming really up close to me. And it seemed like that she had the eyes of like the devil's tango. Like, she wanted to do it. So I remember as she came up to me and then literally out of nowhere, she ended up kind of like grabbing my like shoulders. And then she ended up coming down towards the side of my face. And she ended up giving me a kiss on the cheek saying, you're really cute though. At that point, I knew what was going to go down. And I kind of just didn't think it was the right moment because we were literally in a classroom. And at the time, I'm not going to lie, I didn't know if there was like cameras in the classroom. But at the same time, I didn't really care even though it already kind of just started happening. And let's just say one thing led to another. She ended up getting really close to me. And yeah, she ended up sitting on top of me. And we ended up, I guess, doing the devil's tango on the literal desk. Yeah, not the teacher's desk, on my student desk. So you got to think, a student desk with a teacher on top and me hitting it from behind. You know what? Actually, I don't want to get demonetized, but you guys know what I mean. Anyways, long story short, that ended up happening for like 20 minutes. And I remember out of nowhere, the janitor that was in our school ended up kind of like walking down to each classroom, and he ended up knocking on our classroom and looking through the window and seeing what was going on. I remember he ended up entering in and saying, yeah, you two students shouldn't be in here. Come on, get out of here. Get out of the classroom. I got to clean it up. So I remember we both ended up putting our clothes on as fast as we could, and it seemed like the janitor didn't really care, which was a good thing, I guess. And then afterwards, I remember my science teacher ended up just leaving with me and acted like she was a student in the school, even though she was the literal teacher. But I guess the janitor doesn't really know that. So going on from there, I remember me and her, we ended up just going to the parking lot, and she ended up just telling me, oh, that was a close one. Hopefully no one finds out. And then she ends up going into her car and driving away. Just like that. She didn't even say bye to me. She just said that she was happy we weren't caught. And honestly, I would say that's the last time I ever talked to her, but let's just say she was my teacher. So obviously it wasn't the last time. But let's just say another time when she went under my desk, well, that's where things got really, really intense. I remember in the middle of yoga class, my yoga teacher ends up saying to me, Bubba, after class, can you help me with some stretching I need to do? And at that moment, I realized that the things I was stretching was not what usually you're supposed to do in yoga. But I mean, I did it anyway because, yo, what is going on, you guys? My name is Bubba, and welcome back to another crazy but embarrassing story. This story all starts off back in my high school years, and this was actually back when I was in grade 10. Now, in grade 10, I played rugby. If you guys don't know what rugby is, basically think of football, but 10 times more rough without the armor. Yeah, kind of insane. But I remember playing rugby back when I was younger. I wanted to play an active sport and not just be known as a theater kid, since in grade 9, all I took was theater. And that was to help me with my stutter, but not the point. Anyways, I remember one day after school, I ended up going to rugby practice, and during rugby practice, we were doing like practice games with me and my other teammates. And let's just say one giant dude in my team that would usually take out most of the competition ended up running straight for me since I was left wing, and he ended up tackling me down so bad to the point where I hurt my leg really badly. To the point where I even yelled, ow, my leg! It got to the point where the coach stopped the game, and he ended up walking over to me, realizing that my leg was severely bruised and actually somewhat swelling. So my parents ended up picking me up from school that day, and they ended up helping me out, and actually they realized how bad the pain was, and they ended up taking me to the doctor. When I went to the doctors, I was super annoyed because like waiting for the doctor is like so annoying, especially for how long it takes. But I remember the doctor ends up looking at my leg after like 3 hours of waiting in the waiting room, and he ends up saying to me, yep, that looks like a really bad one right there. Have you ever taken yoga? What? Yoga? No. Well, I would advise you take yoga. Yoga might actually help out with your pain and, stretch those muscles to make sure you don't get injured so easily again. So you just want me to take yoga? Yes, it'll help with the pain and make things a lot better later on. At that moment when he said to take yoga classes, I remember right away my mom was already surfing through the internet for yoga classes that a teenager could take. And let's just say what ends up happening next was actually really weird, because I remember the next day after school, I ended up basically going to my mom's car because she picked me up and she drove me over to this yoga studio that was actually somewhat near my place. She ends up taking me there saying, Bubba, you have to do yoga. You have to stretch and make sure your muscles don't get hurt. Yeah, but like, mom, yoga's like for girls. Yes, but also for people that are injured, and you are injured. Okay, mom, whatever you say is what I told her. And I ended up entering inside this yoga studio with my mother. When I got in there, I remember I ended up seeing a lot of like actually pretty fine women, but a lot of them were like married mothers, so I can't really do much there until I saw my yoga teacher. Now, my yoga teacher was actually, funny enough, a girl that went to a different high school, and she was apparently like a really good yoga teacher because she took like the courses early throughout her high school years. So I remember when I entered inside and saw her, she ends up looking at me super confused and walks up to me. She walks up to me and says, you're someone I haven't seen here before. What are you doing here? Oh, I'm here for yoga. My leg got injured recently, and like the doctor said to like, stretch it out, and I guess you're here to help me out with that. Oh, well, yeah, 100%. Here, here, go on one of the mats and just follow along with the class. At that moment, my mom ended up leaving the building. And at that moment, I stood on the yoga mat, super embarrassed. Because the whole time, a bunch of moms were looking at me, confused on why in the world there was another dude in the class. Because the only other dude that was in there was some gay dude. So me hoping that everyone didn't think I was just a random gay dude as well, the class started and they started doing really like a lot of different positions. Like we started stretching our legs, we started stretching our torsos. Basically, we did basic yoga stuff. If you guys don't know what yoga is, then my advice, take it if you need it, not if you want to, because I don't really see any upsides to yoga, even after taking the class. But I remember the whole time when we were doing these like stretching and positions and stuff, the yoga teacher that was the high school student ends up walking up to me saying, Bubba, you're supposed to like do this. And she ends up grabbing my thighs and stretching them out even more. It felt really uncomfortable that she was actually getting that close to my eggplant, but 100% she noticed that after like a minute of her trying to stretch me out, which sounds really weird. YouTube, please don't demonetize this video. But after like her of like basically trying to stretch me out, she noticed that I basically got bricked. Yeah, kind of awkward, but at the same time, you gotta understand when you're filled with the room with a bunch of moms that have massive cherries and a yoga teacher that's actually pretty fine and hot as well from a different school, it's kind of bound to happen, don't you think? So from there, I ended up looking at her. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do a different position. Oh, yeah, okay, you can do that. And she ends up getting up and walking away. At that moment, I thought I totally just embarrassed myself and ruined every chance I got to getting with any woman in the yoga class, which is not really the point of me going there, but still better than what I was there originally for. But weeks went on of me going into the yoga class. It was actually funny enough, like 2 weeks I was there, and I went there basically every second day. And every time I would go, the yoga teacher that was there would always look at me really weirdly ever since that day passed of her basically seeing me get bricked. And one thing led to another. Well, let's just say after 2 weeks, things got really awkward. Because I remember after when class ended one time in yoga class, she ends up walking over to me saying, hey, Bubba, what do you usually do after class? I don't know. I usually go home and just play video games. Since I'm injured, I can't really play rugby anymore. Oh, you played rugby. What school do you play for? Oh, I just play for my school that's near my place. And right as I told her my school's name, she ends up actually looking at me kind of freaked out. And she's like, oh, my ex actually is on your rugby team, I think. Oh, okay. Cool, I guess. Yeah, anyways, what are you doing after the next class? I have no plans. Why? Okay, well, let me know. I might have an idea for you to help with your leg. Okay. At that moment, she ends up winking at me and walking away. And I was really confused, but at the same time, maybe this girl had like some interest in me, or maybe she was interested. I don't really know. Maybe she was gonna ask me out, but at the same time, if she was, why didn't she just ask me when I was already there? It made me really confused, but I decided to basically ignore things. And I remember when I got home that day, I ended up playing Call of Duty. And the whole time when I was basically at home, I kept thinking about what this girl wanted to do with me until after tomorrow finally came around. Because I remember I ended up going to my yoga class after my mom dropped me off. And when I entered inside, I ended up seeing my yoga teacher wearing one of the most tightest outfits I've ever seen her wear. Now, during yoga, it's normal to wear tight outfits, so obviously no one else was weirded out. But what she was wearing definitely got me more excited than average. And I remember when class started, the whole time I couldn't stop staring at her to the point where she actually ends up coming up to me saying, hey, so like, are you still free after class? Yeah. Okay, cool. After class, meet me in my office. Okay, cool. What are we doing? Well, I'm gonna like help you with your leg, obviously, and like, you know, do some personal stretching. Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, if it helps with my leg, sure. Oh, it'll help with all three of your legs. All three? At that moment, I thought she was like maybe like, you know, talking about some spiritual leg that she like, you know, knew about in yoga terms. I don't really know, but I remember when class finally ended, all the moms ended up leaving the building, and me, I ended up walking into her office. And when I walked in there, me and her started stretching together, and we started doing like, you know, downward dog and other positions that are apparently really good in yoga. Until randomly, I remember when I was basically watching her stretch one position that she was showing me, she ended up telling me to go behind her. And well, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, we ended up doing the devil's tango because she wanted to help me out with my thrusting, I guess. I don't really know, to be honest, and I can't say anything more than that because I don't want to get in severe trouble online. But yeah, we ended up doing the devil's tango. And things got really, really weird because I remember right after class ended, she ended up handing me a form that said that I was allowed to play rugby again. I ended up looking at her saying, wait, you know, if I get this, I can't enter the class anymore, right? Well, yeah, obviously, but I mean, after that, I'm sure your leg's totally okay. And well, I don't know how she did it, but she was right because my leg felt totally cured afterwards. Maybe she had some magic potion inside of her. You know what? That's really weird. Anyways, guys, that's basically it for today's story. Make sure you guys press that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And like I always say, follow for more embarrassing stories just like this one. Peace out, guys.